Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at color qualia and the human tendency to ask questions. All this from a really interesting Vsauce video where he talks about perception and consciousness.
Yeah, Vsauce dives right in. He says, color as we know it does not exist in the outside world.
Whoa! I mean, what does that even mean? Like, if I look at a red strawberry, is it not actually red?
Well, it turns out that color is just an interpretation. It's how our brains translate the wavelengths of light.
So our eyes receive light, but it's our brain that creates the experience of redness.
Exactly. And that raises the question, is your red the same as my red?
I've never thought about that. It's kind of freaky to think we could be looking at the same thing but having completely different experiences.
That's exactly where qualia come in. Qualia are the subjective, raw feelings of our experiences, like the what it's likeness of something.
Okay, so qualia is like the feeling of redness itself, not just the wavelength. Is that why it's so hard to explain?
Yes. Qualia are really hard to convey because they're so personal. We could map out every neuron in your brain when you see red, but we still wouldn't know what that redness feels like to you.
It's like trying to describe a taste to someone who's never tasted it before. Words can only do so much.
And color is the perfect example. We can measure the wavelengths, but the experience of that color is locked away in your mind.
That's like your own little secret. Vsauce actually uses colorblindness to show how color perception can be so different.
Yeah, that's a great point. It just shows that color isn't some universal constant. It's a whole spectrum of individual experiences. But this leads to the explanatory gap, something philosophers have struggled with forever.
The gap between the physical world and our subjective experience of it.
Right. Vsauce uses this analogy of an alien who can't feel pain. We could teach it all about the biology of pain, but it would never actually know what pain feels like.
I can see the parallel. We know all the science of color, but that feeling of redness is still a mystery.
That's it. And it goes for all qualia, taste, love, pain. We can study how they work, but the experience itself, that's the hard part.
So we're basically creating our own realities in our minds. It's not just passive observation, it's an active experience.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting. Humans have this unique thing that might be related to this awareness of the gap between the world and our minds.
Are you talking about asking questions?
That's it. Think about it. No ape, as smart as they are, has ever been seen asking a question. It's totally a human thing.
So animals can communicate, but they don't try to learn new information by asking. What's that about?
Maybe it's a difference in theory of mind, the understanding that other beings have their own thoughts and knowledge separate from your own.
So we can imagine that someone else might know something we don't, and that makes us ask questions. But apes don't get that.
Seems that way. There's this classic experiment with kids, the Sally Ann test. They tell a kid a story about these two dolls, Sally and Ann. Sally puts a marble in a basket and then leaves. While she's gone, Ann moves the marble to a box.
Okay, I'm following. So when Sally comes back, where will she look for the marble?
That's what they ask. A kid who understands theory of mind will say, Sally looks in the basket, because that's where she left it. They know Sally doesn't have the same information.
But younger kids who don't get theory of mind yet will think Sally knows what they know, and she'll look in the box.
You got it. And here's the thing. Even apes who know sign language fail this test, just like the little kids.
So it seems like they don't grasp the idea of different perspectives.
And that brings us to a fascinating connection. Maybe our ability to question, which comes from theory of mind, is also linked to that awareness of the explanatory gap we talked about. We know our knowledge is limited, so we seek information from others.
So maybe this feeling of being alone in our minds with our unique qualia makes us want to connect and bridge the gap by asking questions. This is getting deep.
It is, and it's only going to get deeper from here. In part 2, we'll explore what Vsauce has to say about how all this fits into the bigger picture of what makes us human.
Okay, so we've got this idea that color is, subjective, and that qualia, those raw feelings of our experiences, are totally personal. How does our ability to ask questions, which is like this unique human thing, fit into all of this?
Well, the interesting thing is that our capacity to question, to basically acknowledge that we don't know everything, might actually be connected to our understanding of subjective experience itself.
Wait, are you saying that because we're aware of that explanatory gap, the fact that we're each kind of stuck in our own minds with these qualia that are hard to explain, are you saying that's why we try to connect with others through language?
That's exactly it. We're always trying to bridge that gap, trying to share our inner world, even though, We can never really truly get inside someone else's head. It's almost like we need to find common ground in all of this subjectivity.
That's a cool thought. It's like we know we're separate, but that makes us want to connect even more.
And if we think about color, uh, it's kind of mind-blowing to realize that something so basic to how we see the world, something we take for granted, is actually just a product of our own minds.
It really shows that we're not just passively watching the world go by, we're actually creating our own experiences.
Exactly. And that means it's important to remember that we all have our own biases and limitations. What we see, what we hear, feel, even taste, it's all filtered through our own experiences, our own brains.
So even when we try to be objective, there's always some subjectivity mixed in.
Definitely. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually what makes each of us unique, right?
Yeah.
It's what gives us the richness and diversity of human experience.
It's like we each have our own internal kaleidoscope, and we're all projecting a slightly different view of reality.
Uh-huh. I like that. And that's exactly why empathy and understanding are so important when we interact with other people.
Mm.
We need to remember that their perception might be different from ours. And it's not because they're wrong. It's just because they're seeing the world through their own lens, their own set of qualia.
That makes a lot of sense. But how does all of this, the color stuff, the qualia, theory of mind, how does it actually matter for the listener out there? Why should they care?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the answer is that these ideas, even though they sound kind of abstract, have really practical implications for our everyday lives. Understanding how our minds work, how we perceive things, and how we see each other, that can totally change the way we interact with people, how we deal with relationships, all that stuff.
Can you give some specific examples of that?
Sure. For example, knowing that color is subjective, that can help us understand people's preferences better.
Mm.
Like if someone's favorite color isn't the same as yours, it doesn't mean they have bad taste. Their brain is just creating a different experience of that color.
So instead of judging their choice, we can just appreciate that we all experience things differently.
Exactly. And with qualia, remember how hard they are to share. Well, that can make us more compassionate and more empathetic listeners. We can never truly know what it's like to be someone else, but we can try to really listen with an open mind and an open heart.
I get that. And where does theory of mind fit into this?
Well, understanding that other people have minds just like ours, with their own thoughts and beliefs and all that, that's super important for communicating and building relationships. It helps us anticipate what people need, see things from their perspective, avoid misunderstandings.
So all this stuff, all these concepts we've been talking about, even though they come from philosophy and neuroscience and all that, they actually matter for how we live our lives every day.
Precisely. They can help us be more self-aware, build stronger relationships, and just navigate the world a little better.
Now, Vsauce ends his video with this really thought-provoking question. He says, if we could invent a language that perfectly conveyed qualia, could we finally close that explanatory gap? Could we finally share our subjective experiences with others perfectly?
That question has been bugging philosophers and scientists forever. And we might never have a perfect answer, but it's definitely worth thinking about. Even if we can never fully bridge the gap between minds, just the fact that we're trying to connect, trying to understand each other's inner worlds, that's a big part of what makes us human.
So even though, in a way, we're fundamentally alone in our minds, we still have this deep desire to connect, to share our experiences and find common ground.
And that's a pretty beautiful thing to think about. It speaks to the power of human connection, our ability to understand each other, to feel empathy.
So we've talked about how color is subjective, the mysteries of qualia, and the power of questions. As we wrap up part 2 of this deep dive, what are the main things we want the listener to take away from this?
Wow, we've really gone deep on this one, haven't we? From color perception to qualia to asking questions. It seems like Vsauce is taking us on this journey of self-discovery, like understanding our place in the universe or something.
He emphasizes that knowledge isn't just about the facts, it's about making those connections between ideas, understanding what they all mean, and using that to ask even better questions. It's about keeping that curiosity alive.
Yeah, it's like curiosity is the fuel for our imaginations, right? That's
Yeah.
what pushes us to explore, to learn new things.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be like big scientific discoveries. It can be as simple as looking at a leaf and seeing all the intricate patterns or wondering why the sky is blue. It's about finding that sense of wonder in the everyday, appreciating the world around us, never losing that childlike awe. I love those moments when you look at something we've seen a million times before, but you see it in a new way. Suddenly it's not ordinary anymore.
That's it. That's that shift in perspective, that willingness to see things with fresh eyes. That's what Vsauce is all about. He wants us to be active in our own understanding, to never stop questioning, exploring, searching for deeper meaning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into color, qualia, and the questioning ape, what are the key takeaways? What do we want our listener to walk away with?
Well, we learned that color, the way we see it, isn't actually out there in the world. It's created in our brains, which means even something as basic as color can be different for different people.
And we explored this idea of qualia, those raw feelings of experience that are so hard to put into words. It really shows how hard it is to explain our subjective experiences to someone else. Everyone experiences the world in their own unique way.
And we also talked about how humans are unique in our ability to ask questions, which might be tied to our theory of mind. Understanding that other beings have their own thoughts and knowledge. Maybe that's what makes us want to connect with others, to share our experiences and bridge that gap between our individual realities.
It's all connected, isn't it? The way we see the world, our awareness of our own experiences, and our need to connect with others through language, through questions. It's all part of what makes us human.
We are curious creatures by nature, always trying to figure things out. And we each experience the world in a different way, which is a beautiful thing. It's through sharing those experiences, asking questions, and having these kinds of conversations that we can begin to understand just how rich and complex human consciousness really is.
So to our listeners, we say this: embrace your curiosity. Notice the colors around you. Think about your own experiences, what they feel like to you. And don't be afraid to ask questions, even the ones that seem silly or impossible to answer.
Because it's in those moments of wonder, of questioning and searching for answers that we truly feel alive.
And that is a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored the fascinating world of color, qualia, and the questioning ape. Until next time, stay curious.